Buddies for Life actually started from a really personal place for me. My eldest child is autistic and found brushing their teeth so overwhelming. Sensory sensitivities means that strong flavours, smells, textures, excessive foaming and harsh ingredients can all be a real problem. Like many parents, we set out trying to find solutions that would overcome those issues. And Buddies for Life sort of started with a very practical aim to create oral care products for people with sensory sensitivities.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today we are joined by Sian Ellingworth, founder of Buddies for Life, a brand rethinking oral care for people with sensory sensitivities. Really excited to talk to you. Welcome to the show, Sian.
Thank you, Chris. Really glad to be here.
Hey, Sian, great to have you on. Let's start with the idea. If you could take us back to where this idea came from, how you went about starting this out and validating it.
Buddies for Life actually started from a really personal place for me. My eldest child is autistic and found brushing their teeth so overwhelming, which is the case for lots of people in that position. Sensory sensitivities means that strong flavours, textures, excessive foaming and harsh ingredients can all be a real problem. So like many parents, we set out trying to find solutions that would overcome those issues and really struggled to do that. So Buddies for Life sort of started with a very practical aim to create oral care products for people with sensory sensitivities so they could actually tolerate them and use them consistently, because that's really critical to make sure that you have good oral health for life.
So did you make this for your as like a test product for your son and then realize you had something which you could turn into like a real consumer product?
I didn't so much make it in my kitchen and then try it. I was actually in a position where I'd been in procurement professionally and working with big organisations for quite a long time. So I was used to dealing with third-party manufacturers. So I suppose it was natural for me to reach out to some experts and get them to make products for me that I knew were going to be really safe and, tick all of the boxes. So I sort of started off with quite a professional approach immediately.
I think the teeth brushing element of the day, it's such a challenge. My daughter's almost 6 and it's maybe the last 6 months that she's willingly brushed her teeth. It's such a challenge, just such a fight. And so I imagine if there's an extra element to that, there's an actual reason that the kid doesn't want to brush her teeth other than they just don't like to, that's an even bigger challenge to get past.
Yeah, although any challenge, at that stage in that child's life, if they don't like putting something in their mouth and they actively dislike the process, they're much less likely to want to do it. So even if it's a fleeting issue, I think Oral-B did some research on this and found that 70% of families have an issue at some point with at least one child not wanting to brush. So it's actually quite a mainstream issue, is what we've found. And we think about it about children. We accept that children have preferences when it comes to food, about taste and texture. And I think this is just about extending it to realise that also applies to oral hygiene products.
Okay, so you've got this brilliant product which solves this issue. I think you started D2C. When we spoke before we came on, you said that you now no longer sell on Amazon. It costs you more to sell on there than... So you came off. Talk to us about that journey and how that strategy shifted from D2C to B2B, because that seems to have been the big sort of turning point for your business.
Yeah. Actually, just to make that really clear, we are still selling on Amazon at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, but I see that as much, and we're selling in a different way so that we don't lose money on it. anymore. But yeah, I see that as a much smaller part of our business now. So we started D2C, and it worked well for us in terms of being able to reach people who needed the products really quickly. And we built a very loyal customer base. I think a turning point for me was realizing that I needed to find my voice sort of personally, and rather than approaching it from sort of here's a product to approaching it to here's a problem that we're all trying to solve together, and having discussions with organizations that had a similar target, similar vision, trying to make good hygiene accessible to everybody. So that, realizing that, and also realizing that whereas I'd always been a bit nervous about finding my voice and maybe stepping into territory which belonged to dental health professionals or clinicians, I actually started to understand by having some of those conversations in the background, understanding that those professionals wanted to have conversations. They want the insight as to the real life challenges that people are experiencing because they genuinely want to find solutions. So once I realized that, then, that was no longer about the opportunity being about just selling products one at a time. It was collaborating with organizations like dentists, care providers, SEND settings, so people providing for special educational needs and disabilities, and charities, and realizing, okay, it's no longer about, selling one product at a time. This is now we're able to come together and help hundreds of thousands of people and have this really massive impact.
Now, when you started this, was this already a category? Or was this like something you were have to like go out and say like, hey, this is a problem. It's everyone understands it who deals with it. Did you have to do the education part, or was there already sort of a market here?
That is such a good point, Nick. No, it's not a market, and we have had to do a lot of education around it. We are still doing education around it. So I would say one of the biggest strategic sort of changes that's had the biggest impact is that repositioning and educating, and how we approach it, because anything that you're doing where you're involved in healthcare provision, those providers are really interested in insight and evidence. They don't want sales brochures. They want you to provide them with real insight and evidence, and then you can get your foot in the door and start to have some really interesting conversations. So also though, even from a D2C perspective, we realized that we needed to start educating, because there are lots of myths as well. There's so much misinformation around brushing teeth, and things that have changed. There's now insight and evidence around, for example, you should spit, not rinse. And that's something that changed. When I was a child, it was all about you have to make sure that you completely rinse and get rid of all of the toothpaste. But now the view is actually fluoride staying in your mouth. So you just spit out the excess, but then you let the fluoride stay in your mouth and do its job. So there's a lot of just general education about brushing, as well as the education around sensory needs. A lot of people think that children are just being, uncooperative. They don't understand it's a real issue. Some older generations particularly, I think they think, you just need to be firm with children, just like make them do it. And actually it feels like you're torturing somebody who has got these sensory sensitivities. They're overwhelmed and all of their senses are screaming out, this doesn't work for me. This is terrifying. So yeah, increasing understanding is key.
I've never been able to get to grips with the rinse, not spit. For me, it needs to be all rinsed out. My dentist tells me, you are keeping it in, aren't you? So it just doesn't feel right getting like into bed with like toothpaste still all in my mouth. So yeah, again, I can't even imagine for someone who actually is suffering from this like sensory affliction. It's fascinating. Okay, so I think it's a tall order for anybody, especially in like a new category, to educate on a D2C level. You have to like almost do it one by one, or like through your social channels and content. And it's a much easier proposition to go to an organization which is equipped and has like a foot in the door with all these people that are affected by that. Like you said, dental clinics or charities or special education centers and whatnot. So how did you do that? What was the strategy behind that? How did you go into these places, tell them you had this amazing product, and then start selling in bulk to solve this problem?
So I needed to target exactly what you said. Who are the movers and shakers in these different channels? So for us, we've got 3 different channels. We've got dental, education, so schools, and then we've got care, so care providers for aged care. Because I also realised that this isn't an issue that's just for children. So I started off with Buddies, which is very child-centric sort of packaging and approach, and then realised that this is sensory sensitivities are something that can affect people at every age and stage of their lives. So it could be that dementia has changed their taste buds and the sensitivity, or it could be an adult who's had cancer treatment and they can no longer tolerate the toothpaste they've used all their life. So there are various reasons, and for that reason, we developed an adult brand called Senses, which is, making sure that we weren't patronising maybe vulnerable people at end of life who need support with oral hygiene, perhaps moisture care because they've got dry mouth and they need something to support their comfort at that end of life or palliative care stage of their life. So there are, as I say, all sorts of reasons. And for that reason, we've got these 3 channels that we're working with. So we spend some time looking at who are the movers and shakers who have the widest reach and are trusted, because that's the difficult thing when you're new. You're trying to sort of move into a new sector, is working with people who are already trusted and getting them to trust you is, I think, the sort of the best way to be able to approach that. So, for example, with that, we're working with in each sector we have somebody who we're now sort of well aligned with and have formal agreements in place with. So the Magic Dentist is a charity that is all about making sure that children have access to dentists and are all wanting to brush their teeth, so engaging them in brushing. They use magic to do that, so it's quite a novel approach. So they've just launched their Adopt a School programme in Taunton, and we were there on Monday with them. So we've provided the product in their packs that they gave out in the school that day, and it's supported by the local MP. So they've been working on that for the last few years to make that event happen. And we're just so aligned in terms of, in that school, there are 22% of children in that school have got SEND needs. So it made sense for us to provide products that will also work for that 22%. So that's just an example of how we're partnering, and we've done the same with different partners in care and in dental as well.
So how does that lead to more exposure, more trust? I see like you're associating with them, so you have like the sort of partnership. Is that like through those events you get exposure, or are you then able to like use that in your messaging? How does that directly lead to growth?
Yeah, so through providing insight and helping them understand more, because although they're experts in their field, they're not necessarily experts in the sensory aspects of oral care. So and we also work with people who are experts, so that all the products that we've developed, and we've developed a new range of products that we're about to launch, they've all been developed alongside experts. So then we can pass on that expertise. So, for example, when it comes to toothpaste and elderly care, I worked with an amazing lady who headed up, so she worked for the NHS heading up oral education in Hertfordshire. So her team would go into care homes and try to convince people who were resisting having their teeth brushed for them. She would try and convince them to have their teeth brushed. And she had found she was having huge success using our Buddies toothpaste at the time with a very soft brush. She reckoned she was getting success about 98% of the time with people who had absolutely refused for maybe months. So but it wasn't just using those products, it was her approach. And the approach she used, she would let them feel the toothbrush on the back of their hand and how soft it was. She would ask them, she would give them, they firmly had control. And they might have dementia, but they know how something makes them feel, and they will remember how they felt about something next time. So once you've got them to accept, so smelling the toothpaste, asking, can we put those things together? Is it worth a try? Like, are you willing to let me do this? Then she was having that success rate. So we can take that, provide the tools, and at a reasonable cost so that care homes can afford them, and pass on those tips about how they might want to use it. So providing the insight, also training and the materials, and offering all of that advice in formats that work for those particular organisations, so that it's you're moving from here's some products that I want to sell to actually I am becoming a trusted partner, and that you can rely on us, and we'll provide this in whatever format works for you.
So this is really like a grassroots kind of strategy. It's like when you said partnership, I think about like if you're a clothing brand, something like that, you're working with partners who are celebrities, athletes, and it's about that exposure. Even when I see like a lot of other companies in the health space, they're working with maybe like a health influencer. Health influencer is kind of a strange word. Or they get a doctor or a dentist on board, and they're like, that's how they kind of provide the credibility. But you're saying like you're trying to be part of the solution. So you're going talking to these providers and these organizations about the problem and, hey, try this. We're finding, good success with this. And then they go to, to do their jobs, and they use your product. They see it does work. And then it sort of just starts to spread from there. And then I think anytime you have some sort of like community around these problems, so if you have like autistic children, and like those communities talk, there's always like, do you struggle with this? Or how are you dealing with this? And then I would assume you start to get a lot of like word of mouth, like people saying like, hey, we're having a lot of success with this. Are you seeing that?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've been overwhelmed actually by the response that we've had, and people who are selling, they're not our competitors, but they're selling a similar type of solution in the same channels. And they are just so willing to help. So they're recommending our products to their customers and saying, I know that we provide. So there's a company, Waterless. They provide wipes for the autistic market in particular. So a lot of autistic people really struggle using water. So personal hygiene can be a real problem because they just won't accept washing in the usual sense. So having sort of plastic-free, waterless alternatives are brilliant. And the lady who runs that company is so supportive of what we're doing. And so we're all helping each other. We're speaking to the same market and talking about each other's solutions. So that's been brilliant in terms of creating so many more opportunities. I honestly, I talk about people being overwhelmed by brushing. I've been overwhelmed with the really positive response.
That's lovely. We see that not the same extent, I suppose, in our industry. I was blown away when we first started attending conferences and things like that, and you'll see people in your space, in your industry, but that like cross collaboration and willingness to help and support and either to fuel growth for all that's involved is lovely. And then especially in something that you're doing when it really does make a difference to people's lives. That's just wonderful, I think. Okay, Sian, we need to touch on sort of your SEO and search sort of strategy. I think in my opinion, what would be really exciting now is as you're sort of a solution to something that people may not like even know that they need. So I think AI search is ripe for that opportunity where you might have someone say, like, I've got an autistic child, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z. Like, it's going to be very conversational. And obviously that is the point at which we want you to be surfaced as a recommendation for that problem that they might not even know they have. So what strategies are you implementing in order to be in that conversation?
Yep, really, really good point. So, as you know, traditionally SEO has all been about ranking your own website. So, getting your pages to appear when somebody searches on Google, for example, and other search engines. And that still really matters. But now, as you say, people aren't just clicking links anymore. They're asking questions and getting direct answers. So that could be through Google's AI summaries or tools like ChatGPT, which I'm a massive fan of. So the question for us has become sort of, how do we become part of the answers and not just another website in the results? So when we looked at something like what response do we get if we type in or we say, what's a good toothpaste for an autistic child, then there's actually very little high quality, consistent guidance out there. So we realised that what we've come to realise through speaking to experts in this is that AI tools really rely on trusted independent sources rather than companies' website material. So things like articles, expert commentary, real world testimonials. So our strategy has shifted quite a lot. So we still care about our website and content, and we're constantly improving that. But a big part of our focus now is building external credibility. So using PR, media coverage, making sure our product's being talked about and recommended in places that AI systems are more likely to trust. So we're also putting more emphasis on real world validation. So professional testimonials, feedback from those professionals and lived experiences. Because that's often what people and AI models are looking for when forming a recommendation. So I suppose to summarise that, we've moved from thinking, how do we get people to find us, to how do we make sure we're consistently recognised as a trusted solution wherever people or AI are looking for answers. So I think it's still early days in how all of this plays out, but it does feel like a much more sustainable way of building visibility.
I think it's going to be an interesting industry because for like a lot of people who are looking at AI visibility, it's like, who's the best PR agency? They're competing for the same Google terms. Here, I think you have a lot of people who aren't solution aware. They know what the problem is. They're in ChatGPT saying they're not looking for a product. They're saying, like, how do I get my kid to brush their teeth? And then that's when not just your content can show up, but like, here's some communities where this is being discussed on Reddit or Facebook. And in those communities, they might be recommending your product. So there's a lot of different paths to discovery for people when they're starting to talk with ChatGPT about the solutions. And I think that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out over the next year or two when that becomes more prevalent.
Yeah, I agree. And also my approach is I'm happy to have competition. I don't see it as competition. I see it as we're all trying to find a solution. My products will work for some people, but not everyone. I'm really happy to also have other solutions being talked about in my space. I would have links on my website to other options because that's what it's about, providing options.
Yeah. 100%. Sian, this has been fantastic. If people want to find your product or they want to connect with you, where's the best places they can go?
So buddiesforlife.co.uk is our website, and we are on social media as well. To be honest, we have a number of different names because we couldn't get Buddies for Life across the whole piece. So I won't go into all of those now. I'll simply just say buddiesforlife.co.uk.
Okay, I had the same problem. So we're like Linkify on a bunch of places, and then Linkify with a cheeky little underscore at the end, just so I could
On social.
get the handle. Yeah. Sian, thank you so much. We wish you all the best and every success with the product. And thank you for being such a great guest.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's great. Thanks.